Short answer, considering the impact of emerging technologies, of which AI is just an example, and there are others as well. But the impact of AI would be that there has to be a new lens, there has to be an enhanced lens with which you view your organization's risk appetite, risk exposure, and then consecutively what you need to manage that risk. So the answer is yes, it will massively impact the risk landscape for any organization. And let me take an example. AI or generative AI as well is what we all best understand, because from a user experience standpoint, that's what we have been exposed to the most. Take ChatGPT for an example, right? I can think of off the top of my head, three things that will potentially get impacted amongst many others. Think about, when we use ChatGPT, for a non-work related event as well. What are the touch points? One, it has a base data that it is trained on. There are certain nuances that go into how the transformer within the GPT model kind of operates. It's built on large language models. One of the things that's rapidly coming up is what we call as responsible AI, which is nothing but ensuring that your transformer or GPT-based AI kind of currently runs on large data sets. How do you ensure that there is no inherent bias, for example, that is coming in via the responses that are getting generated? How do you protect your organization and the responses for people within the organizations against certain inherent biases, against incorrect responses, data accuracy, and so on and so forth, right? So there is an element of risk management that will have to focus on that aspect. The second thing I can think of is your data privacy now needs a new lens. You are no longer looking at securing your data within, enclosed boxes, for example. There are too many touch points. The data that goes in and gets generated ultimately out of your GPT models, for example, has an enhanced risk of running into, privacy regulations or any information that ideally should not be passed on. It's becoming very easy from a data perspective for data to be leaked. The third thing I would say is just access in general. What are the touch points of that technology within multiple other existing technology landscapes that the organization has, for example? So I think AI in general is one of the emerging technologies, but emerging technologies, I would say overall, needs to be looked at. It is one of the focus areas that the companies are now looking at whenever they're designing their digital strategy, their transformation programs, and consecutively their risk management programs as well. So overall, I think AI would have a massive impact. There are already quite a few regulations that exist in the market. The government has already kind of focused on these nuances. There is the European Act around the fair use of AI. What are the company responsibilities, and consecutively, what are the user's responsibility as it relates to the risks within AI? There are guidelines and regulations that already exist, but still at a nascent stage. I think every day we are still learning about what are the risks that AI poses us, and there's a continuous evaluation to some of these guidelines as well, and there are many more to come that the organizations will have to comply with.
Just one point to add to what Garima said. Now, and that's more from a role as a risk professional. Just yesterday, I was listening to a couple of the UI leaders talking about AI. And one of the things that came up was they are building models around using Gen AI in typical accounting practices, in typical, let's say, auditing practices, etc. And what's coming out is very well that the skill set that is lacking is not necessarily the ability to build an AI. It is the ability to look at AI or any other software for that matter critically and think about what are the different risks that the new technology brings in. So as a risk professional, the single biggest impact of AI or the single biggest impact of any new technology is going to be the larger range of skill sets that are needed as a risk professional. A risk professional will need to understand how, say, for example, Gen AI operates. Garima spoke about the data, underlying data, potential issues with bias, potential issues with rule sets that affect the Gen AI, etc. So similarly, a risk professional needs to understand what are those risk areas? How do I evaluate them? How do I operationalize those risk areas so that the Gen AI teams, the company, the organizations that use Gen AI, etc., can continue to operate effectively. So the outside-in perspective of an auditor is what's required when each of these new technologies come in. So for all practical purposes, the good news is we'll always have more work.